Welcome to Legal Connect, where each week we sit down with top lawyers to demystify the process of hiring and working with legal counsel in today's world. From navigating the legal system to understanding your rights, our expert guests provide valuable insights and tips for anyone facing a legal challenge. So tune in, take notes, and join us as we explore the ins and outs of the legal profession. A quick disclaimer, anything discussed in the podcast is general tips and advice, not formal legal advice. Always consult a lawyer. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Legal Connect podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by Andrew Rudder from Rudder Law Group today. Andrew is a personal injury lawyer, and so we're going to cover all things related to personal injury law and share some tips that people might need to know if they are looking to hire an injury lawyer for the first time. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you and excited for the conversation. So I guess just to start, why don't you just tell us a little bit of your background and how you got into the legal profession and specifically into the area of injury law?
Yeah, so I started in law from Rudder Law Group about a year and a half ago. It was around the time I just finished writing my first book, Catastrophic Impairment Law in Canada. And I got into law. Funny story. When I was young, my grandmother used to watch a show your audience might be familiar with called Matlock, starring Andy Griffin. And when I was a kid, I was fascinated with how this young country guy, small firm, pretty much solo practitioner, was able to take on these big files and how he was just so immersed in his investigation. He would go to the crime scene, would interview tons of people. And I loved how eloquent he was when he was in the court. And I saw this guy as a boy, growing up, and I was just fascinated with his rhetoric, right? In his presence, and how much he really connected with his clients. And that was kind of my first kind of foray into the whole legal world. In terms of doing the kind of law I do, I've always rooted for the underdog. So for me, whenever I get a sense that, the small guy, David, is being, done unfairly by the big guy, Goliath, that really, really pulls my heartstrings. And to be able to provide that balance of power and help out the little guy seek that justice that he or she deserves is really, really meaningful for me.
That's amazing. I love that connection too, back to your childhood and seeing that on TV and then, being inspired by that so much that it carried you through up to your career to this point. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess where were you before you, started your own practice? Were you working for a firm or were you always working in injury law?
I was always working in personal injury law. When I first started, I started looking for a bigger law firm in downtown Toronto. I actually started doing defense work during my articling. And it didn't really feel right for me. I was helping a bigger insurance company. I was trying to deny claims to single individuals. I really sensed that power imbalance as well. And I felt like I was on the wrong team. And also looking at a bigger law firm, you really have to fit into that particular culture. And the longer you stay in this business, the more you start to realize you have a unique way of doing things. And you start to get a sense, the law, you want to venture out on your own. I got bit by that, that entrepreneurial bug. And I just had a different idea of how practice should be run. And I guess that was one of the motivating factors for me to eventually say, you know what, let's just do it now. I did it. I started my law firm during the global pandemic of all times.
Wow.
I learned that it's never a right time to start anything, right? You can never wait for a perfect moment when the stars are perfectly in line to get out and venture and take that leap of faith and just pursue what you're really passionate about, right? How to bring that dream of yours to fruition. When you have that gut in that feeling in your gut and your instincts is telling you that to do, sometimes you just got to do it, even when, things aren't perfectly aligned. You have to take that step.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the blessings or the positive things the pandemic did give us is that it made a lot of people kind of question their path or trajectory that they were on in life and question, without that daily routine or without being able to go to work every day, is that still what they wanted to do? And I think a lot of people like yourself did find themselves kind of more gravitating towards entrepreneurship because it just showed you how unstable all these people who thought they had these, stable jobs and, predictable life. It just showed that it's not as stable as we think sometimes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And how has that entrepreneurial journey been for you so far? Obviously coming from starting that up during COVID up until where we are today, how has that gone for you so far?
It's been faced with a lot of challenges. but I like challenges. I like when things are a little more difficult. It really builds character. You really learn a lot more about yourself when you go through those struggles. One of the biggest adjustments for me was wearing multiple hats. Right? Like when I was working for a big law firm, I wore one hat. I was a lawyer. That was that. I was pretty good at it. The moment I stepped out on my own, I have to worry about my financing. I have to worry about my marketing. I got to worry about my advertising. I got to worry about developing my personal brand and my corporate brand. There's so many other things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and so much problems you have to find solutions for on a day-to-day basis. Initially it's a little overwhelming. What are the biggest things that businesses always have to deal with? How do I get clients? Never had to worry about that before. I went to the law firm. They gave me like a caseload. I had files. Now you have to go out and create business for yourself, and those are all the things you have to learn, quickly. And so it has been challenging, but it's been so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's kind of nice in the sense that you're finding clientele that really do need you, and people that might not be able to, find a big law firm or were intimidated by working with a bigger firm, that we feel more comfortable coming to you as a solo practitioner because you can relate to them more, you can actually communicate with them more deeply, I'm guessing, right?
Absolutely. Definitely get to offer that more personal touch. Well, one of the things I like to do whenever I take out a new client, when I sign that retainer, I go out of my way to go to the client's house, which always shocks some people when they see like a lawyer who's actually representing them at their house. I don't just go there just to establish a connection with my client. I also want to get to know my client's family, their immediate family members. I want to know who they care about. I want to learn more from their family as well, because oftentimes an injured person will disclose everything that's wrong with them. So you get a lot more insight when you talk to people that they love. And I want to learn how their impairments, adversely affect their day-to-day function. What are the things that give meaning to their life prior to the accident that they struggle to do now? Establish that connection early on, setting the tone is so important right from the get-go.
Yeah, and that's so important, especially you being in that area of personal injury law, like you said, to actually see how it affects their day-to-day life, right? Not all areas, I think, affected as closely as an injury. Obviously, an injury just completely changes how you go about living your life. So I think that's very special that you offer that service to your clients and offer that personal touch. So let's kind of shift more to kind of some of the services that you are offering right now and what kinds of people might be seeking them out. So can you kind of speak to, is there different services under the branch of personal injury law? Is there common cases that you sort of deal with?
Yeah, so personal injury law, like the niche area I deal with is what's called catastrophic impairment. So that's a niche area of personal injury law. So I deal with clients who suffer more catastrophic impairments, such as traumatic brain injuries, fractures in their spines, paraplegia, tetraplegia, loss of mobility in the leg, things of that nature, loss of vision, more serious catastrophic injuries that have a greater impact on their ability to function in their day-to-day life. So when I start a lawsuit for someone, there's two avenues in Ontario. There's what's called an accident benefit claim, which is a claim against the individual's own insurance company, and that operates within a no-fault insurance regime. Then I also pursue a tort lawsuit, and that's against the at-fault driver who claiming was negligent, was a cause of the accident. And it's a tort lawsuit that has the potential to go to action trial. So I do both, the accident benefits claim to the tort lawsuit.
Oh, did I freeze up for you? Are you good?
Yeah, very good. Froze up a bit, but yeah, now you're back.
I heard everything you said to the end of that sentence, so that's perfect. We should just put this little blip out, but no, that's great. And kind of like back to those kind of differences, is it quite obvious for clients, like me speaking as somebody who has never had to, thankfully, hire a personal injury lawyer up to this point? Is it clear, what kind of those two cases someone might pursue, or do you kind of help guide the client in determining the direction of it?
So it's definitely not clear. I usually pursue both avenues, right? So I first start off the accident benefits claim, right? Because typically, if it's not a catastrophic impairment, the policy limits are usually minor into guidelines, which is $2,500 or $65,000 policy limits. The cases I take on are usually ones where there's a possibility of acquiring what's called a catastrophic impairment designation, which increases the policy limits from $65,000 to $1 million. So I usually pursue the accident benefits claim first. And then around the 2-year mark is when I start to proceed a tort lawsuit. And the reason for that is because under the legislation in Ontario, under the Insurance Act, that we've got what's called a threshold test that has to be met. It's basically you have to demonstrate that your injuries you sustained from the accident are severe and permanent, right? In the sense of their impact on your ability to function in your day-to-day life as well as your employment, etc. Right? So you usually get a sense of the permanency of an individual's injuries, usually around the 2-year mark. That's when it kind of plateaus. And you get a sense of whether or not you're able to meet that legislative threshold test outlined in the legislation and proceed with a tort lawsuit.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And then I guess for someone who is just kind of starting this process, maybe they just sustained an injury. I'm trying to kind of put myself in their shoes a little bit and think about what point would they have to reach out to a lawyer like yourself? You know, is it at that 2-year threshold or should they be reaching out almost immediately after the injury happens?
Yeah, they should be reaching out more immediately. You don't definitely want to wait to the 2-year mark because we have what's called statute of limitations, right? So if you don't initiate a lawsuit within 2 years from the date of the accident, then, you know, you're going to be statute barred from pursuing a lawsuit, unless you could provide some other arguments that I won't get into. But so you definitely want to reach out sooner, right? Usually shortly after the accident. You want to kickstart the accident benefits claim right away because, you know, when you're dealing with someone who sustained catastrophic injuries, you know, there's so much need for rehabilitation treatment. And you want to get that going as soon as possible, right? The sooner you start meeting the specialists and they provide a various diagnosis, you can see your family doctor, can make the various referrals to the specialist you need to see, and then you can start submitting what we call treatment plans to your insurer to get you that rehabilitation treatment and also the medication that you need to kickstart your recovery, the better.
Yeah. And all those kind of specialists and all these various treatments that one would need if they had an injury to this magnitude, is that something that they would also potentially be awarded as rewards in the case? Or how does that kind of, the process of figuring out what kinds of damages that people can be compensated for, how does that look for various situations?
So it differs depending on which one you're talking about. When you're talking about accident benefits claim, you're not talking about damages, you're talking about benefits, right? So you might be entitled to what's called income replacement benefits if you can't work, right? And then you get paid X certain amount of money every single week. You also might be entitled to non-earner benefits. There's just medical rehabilitation benefits that you get when your specialist at scene, you submit what's called no state faith and treatment plan to your insurer. They kind of determine whether the treatment that you're asking for is reasonable and necessary, right? So there's various benefits that you can claim, not necessarily get, but you can claim. And then, of course, if there's any denial, then you have to go through the dispute process where here in Ontario, you would submit an appeal application to the License Appeal Tribunal. Now, that's different from a tort lawsuit. So a tort lawsuit, you're seeking finality either through a settlement some point down the future or ultimately going to trial where you have a judge alone or a judge and jury making that decision at trial. And then there's various what we call heads of damages that you can claim. Right? So the most popular category of damages is compensatory damages. Right? So, and then there's various categories, subcategories, I should say, within that. So, for example, there's what we call general damages. General damages is for pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, loss of amenities. Right? You also have what's called special damages or pecuniary damages. You know, that which is monetary, quantifiable rather, early on, right? Whether or not it's lost expenses, physician fees, time spent at a hospital, etc., like that. Things you could quantify right off the bat, you could claim. And there's past expenses, past income loss. There's also future income loss as well. You also have past cost of care and future cost of care, right? You also have a damage that falls under loss of housekeeping capacity, an inability to take care of your house at home, right? You quantify that, place a number on that, right? It's also important to know that any award that you get in your tort lawsuit, which typically follows your accident benefits claim, the insurance company that's defending that on behalf of the at-fault driver could deduct awards you got in your accident benefits claim, right? Because there's crossover there, right? Income replacement benefits, your accident benefits claim, that's to compensate you for your ability to make money. Well, if you go for a tort lawsuit and you're also suing for loss of income, well, then, you know, the latter sets off the former, right? So that's another thing you have to keep in mind too.
Yeah. Now, when people are kind of thinking about these and planning out what this process is going to look like and how to proceed, what does the timeline look like? I would imagine it varies quite a bit depending on the situation, but, especially if you're going, you're suing a bigger company or you're proceeding that kind of tort route, if I'm saying it correctly, I would imagine that could take years. Is that correct?
Well, you have to pass the trial record within 5 years of the accident, right? And usually you commence a tort lawsuit, usually around a 2-year mark, sometimes earlier. If it's a client who's sustained a very catastrophic impairments, I'll commence earlier. It's very obvious and a more serious accident that the injuries are going to be permanent and very serious in terms of their substantially, affecting their ability to function. So usually it takes between 2 to 5 years. Sometimes longer if there's delay in setting it down for trial.
Yeah.
So it could go 6-7 years if you're setting it down for trial. So that's usually the time frame you're looking at. The accident benefits claim, benefits can be paid out for a 5-year period. But oftentimes, once an insurance company is approving benefits on a consistent basis, they look at what's called the burn rate, which is the amount of money they're spending on a monthly basis. And they get a sense that the amount that they're going to expend is probably going to surpass the policy limits, then they reach out to you to try to settle your accident benefits claim before the 5-year mark.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, what kind of supports are available for these victims of an injury in the meantime, right? Because if you're waiting, 2 to 5 years potentially for some of these payments or benefits to be made, is there things that people can seek out to help kind of cushion that blow in the meantime?
And this is exactly why you pursue the accident benefits claim in a tort lawsuit, because a tort lawsuit is a thing that takes 2 to 5, maybe even more, 6 years to resolve. But during the interim, you're seeking benefits from your first party insurer to get you the treatment that you need to cover your loss of income.
Right. That's perfect. And I love how you kind of explain how those two things work in tandem, because obviously they're both important for very different reasons. And having that accident benefit in place can definitely help, as you said, kind of help support people with those more immediate needs, which is definitely ideal, right?
Exactly.
And I guess so one of the things people probably are most curious about when it comes to personal injury law is proving liability. So I know there's things in the US, for example, where it's like shared liability and that you could potentially have your the damages you receive or the benefit reduced depending on that kind of split. But is that the same in Canada, or how does liability and proving it work here?
It is the same in Canada. So in terms of liability, you want to prove that the conduct or behavior of, in this case, the at-fault driver dealing with one vehicle accident, what was negligent in that it falls below the requisite standard of care, which is an objective standard of a reasonable person. And then you also want to be able to prove that there's a direct causal link between, in this case, the accident and, of course, the impairments that you ultimately sustain, right? In terms of what you're talking about, we call it contributory negligence. So that's a case where you, the plaintiff, who's suing the defendant, was negligent in some form. For example, you weren't wearing your seatbelt. So there has to be a determination in terms of like a percentage, in terms of how much your own negligence in this case contributed to your own injuries and impairments that you sustained that you're suing the defendant for. So if there's a determination that your contributory negligence was 20% in terms of contributing to your own injuries, then that's a amount that will ultimately be deducted from the overall award for all of the heads of damages that I touched upon briefly earlier on. So if you're awarded $100,000 in damages and it's determined that you're 25% contributory negligent, well then $25,000 will be deducted from that.
Right. Okay. And then since the standard of care you talk about, you mentioned is kind of more of an objective standard, right? It can obviously change depending on the situation. That must be difficult for you as the lawyer then coming in to try and define what that is. But how do you kind of go about doing that if you obviously you don't have to provide detailed situations when you ever want to offer legal advice, but just generally, how do you even begin to approach what is reasonable in a certain situation?
Well, for me, it's not that difficult unless you're dealing with a case where the plaintiff was very negligent in his or her own behavior. So usually in the cases I deal with, it's very cut and dry. Usually you have like a rare end accident, which the case law is very clear. In a situation like that, usually the onus is on the defendant, right? In cases like, and also, if there ever is like a liability issue, we usually bring in like a forensic engineer to recreate the accident. They got to get a sense of the accident dynamics, etc. But usually the cases I work are usually more straightforward. They don't usually have huge liability issues with regards to my clients. And then obviously in terms of the causal nexus that you have to establish, the immediate diagnostic imaging tests that are done after the accident, the doctors assess your client. They attribute the particular the injuries that you've sustained, the diagnosis they're providing to the actual accident that occurred. All right.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess the other thing we're wondering then, so I think you already addressed it, because I think some people think that they can't go ahead and pursue these kind of lawsuits if they are partially at fault, but it sounds like they can. Again, it might just be that contributory negligence where it's determining the split of who is at fault and how much, right? So
exactly.
Should be heard by, even if it was partially their fault, they should still go ahead and proceed with this kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit more into hiring a personal injury lawyer, especially for somebody who maybe is in an accident for the first time, is kind of navigating this and doesn't even really know where to start. What is the best way to, I guess, choose a personal injury lawyer? I already have some ideas about why someone might seek you out, especially that personal touch that you're talking about giving your clients. But what should people be looking for when it comes to someone to represent them in this situation?
Well, you always want someone who's prepared to go to trial. That's a big factor as well, right? Because, the vast majority of matters don't go to trial. I'd say maybe under 6% of all matters ultimately go to trial. So that means the vast majority of matters are actually settled, right? But like what they settle for, insurance companies do a cost benefit analysis, right? So if you're dealing with a lawyer who has a reputation going to trial, he's willing to go an extra mile, spend that 2 to 5 weeks if it's a long trial versus a short trial, to get the right result for his client. A lot of insurance companies they would factor that in addition to assessing, other things in terms of what amount they'll ultimately settle for, right? So having a lawyer with trial experience to go to trial is obviously very important. Having a lawyer who looks at you as a person and not just the file number, not just looking at you as one of many clients who just wants to settle for X amount to make money. Someone who actually, has that personal touch, actually listens to you, gets to know you and your family, right? I know for myself, I have clients who, not everyone operates within that 9 to 5 window, right? So some of my clients operate better at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Some operate better at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I have a client sometimes sends me a text message at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh no! Yeah.
So I try to make myself available for my clients, and I have sometimes woken up in the morning at 5, saw a text message, actually responded. And little things like that, respond to your client within 24 hours, going to your client's house, adding that personal touch goes such a long way. And it really communicates to your client that you really care for them, you're willing to go that extra mile. And lawyers who demonstrate that often do go that extra mile, right? Also, none lawyers very knowledgeable, so it's hard to tell. You can't just tell someone's knowledge by, looking at their website, but seeing how active they are in the community, seeing how much presentations they do on a regular basis. How often do they write in legal journal articles that are peer reviewed? How what books are they publishing? Are they going to seminars and teaching a lot of other people? So when you teach a lot of other people, it requires you to elevate your level of understanding of that material in order to teach it to other people. Those things are other signs of a lawyer distinguishing himself and is really dedicated to perfecting his craft.
Yeah. And speaking of which, obviously, I feel like you're kind of doing all these things yourself because you were a great example of these things. But tell us a little bit more about your book. So you mentioned that you had written a book, and what is it about, and can it be helpful for somebody who is navigating the situation for the first time?
Yes and no. So my book is Catastrophic Impairment Law. So I basically compare the various insurance regimes throughout the province of Canada. And I was wanting to see if any of the laws had discriminatory applications based on geography that impacted sort of marginalized groups. And my inspiration for that book was a client that I represented recently who I got a catastrophic impairment designation. This was an Indigenous girl, a teenage girl, mother of one, a disabled infant. And she sustained a very bad accident, very catastrophic traumatic brain injury. And I thought she met the criteria for catastrophic impairment designation. I thought it was pretty straightforward. The doctor I retained thought so as well, neuropsychologist, PhD. The neurologist that the insurance company retained also thought that she met the criteria. But the insurance company took advantage of a bureaucratic glitch in the legislation to deny my client a CAT designation. So again, one of those things when I kept saying that imbalance of power really pulls my heartstrings. And I fought for her, dug deep, looked at the evolution of the catastrophic impairment designation from the 1990s to the present. I interviewed the doctors who gave recommendations to the Minister of Finance, and also, the legislatures relied upon while drafting the bill, which ultimately led to the act. I ultimately persuaded the insurance company to overturn that decision. For me, it wasn't enough because I started thinking, well, what else? Like, how many other people in the future, how many other children with the same kind of brain injuries in the future are they going to take advantage of and exploit that bureaucratic glitch I mentioned? So it was one of those situations where, for me, the retainer have the client, that's great. And I got a good result for my client and the family. But I felt my duty, extended beyond my client to the larger community. So I took it upon myself to change a lot. And I did. I brought attention to it. I got media involved. I brought politicians involved. I brought legal organizations involved, like Outlaw. And I got to sit down at the table with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, which regulates the Insurance Act. And they agreed to amend the guideline and get rid of that bureaucratic glitch. So after I did that, I said, I want to write about this. And then I was curious. I said, well, this was a problem that existed in Ontario. And I got to thinking, well, wait a minute. This other problem exists in Canada, in territories. Was this just a provincial issue in my province? Or was this a national issue? So that was kind of the inspiration for the book. Combination of wanting to get the word out and what happened, and also to see if there was an issue on a national level.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on succeeding in getting that law changed. That's amazing. And talk about going above and beyond the call of of duty there. But I think that's great. And I think that more lawyers should be looking more critically at these laws, especially, like you said, how it affects more marginalized groups and communities, because it's one thing to just practice the law and interpret it, and you're trying to win a case for your client, but it's another thing to see that you get the result, and then you start looking at how this is impacting people outside of just Ontario. That's very inspiring. And I think more lawyers should look critically at those kind of things like you have. Yeah. And I guess it sounds like too that people, perhaps people, if they are in a marginalized group, given your experience and given this whole experience you had already, the book, that they can probably feel safer coming to you. Is that the case that you do kind of deal with some marginalized populations? Is that kind of a common thing, or is that more of a one-off situation you had there?
It's actually much more common. I now have a lot more Indigenous clients. And I find that there's some barriers there I have to be overcome. I know, for example, that there's, and it's no fault of anyone's, but there is, I found that there's a bit of inherent distrust of institutions and organizations that exist outside of the reservation. And the clients that I represent reside on the Six Nations Reservation, Six Nations of the Grand River Reservation here in Ontario. And that's a barrier to them, actually seeking, for example, treatment after an accident, which an insurance company can then interpret negatively. Like, well, you aren't that injured because you're not seeking. Well, no, there's a cultural barrier there you have to understand. So a lot of it's also educating the insurance company as well about my clients, right? And how not actively seeking treatment, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not injured. And also getting the right team involved as well. When I'm working with my Indigenous clients, I make sure I have to bring on an occupational therapist to do the necessary initial assessments and then make the recommendations as referrals, like for additional treatment plans from specialists. I like to get someone who's also Indigenous, who understands the culture, who can connect with them in a much deeper way. Right?
Yeah.
to help me overcome some of these cultural barriers that I deal with a lot.
Yeah.
So, and again, that comes as being sensitive to the cultural differences, really listening to your client, really observing, the barriers that are acting as obstructions to their access to justice. Right. That's something that I take pride in.
Yeah, that's amazing. Good for, and also one thing, just that people are wondering too, if they happen to be listening to this and they are Indigenous. You mentioned earlier in the interview that you will kind of go out to clients' houses or go to where they live and, see how they live and see how the injuries impact in their daily life. Are you making trips, to the reservation? Because I know that's one of the things with Indigenous people and populations as well, is it's harder sometimes to, travel into the city or wherever you are located. So are you making trips out there to be able to meet with them there?
Absolutely. I'm so happy you brought that up, because I absolutely do. For my clients, I go to their houses often, which surprises them.
That's great.
It's about a 50-minute drive for me to get to the station of the Grand River from where I live. I do it. And to see the surprise on their face oftentimes, and when they see I'm not just there for a quick, pop in and pop out, and I sit down and I get to know the family, get to know the grandparents, I get to know aunts, uncles, get to try to get a sense of what your day-to-day life is. That means so much to them. It's really immeasurable how far that goes with them. You would drive all the way there and take the time to sit down in their house, have a cup of coffee, and get to know them and their family and their day-to-day struggles. And for me, it helps me too. It helps me understand them. It helps me, it inspires me, because I feel I want to fight more for them when I get to know them. Right. And I know some lawyers talk about not crossing that line and not getting that too personal. But for me, I don't buy into that. For me, when I get to know their story, it makes the cause even more worth it to fight for. And it just invigorates me and gets me up, get ready to go into court and battle for them even more. So I know it's not for everyone, but I encourage that. It works for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm very impressed. It's like it's really nice to see lawyers that are actually taking their work so much to heart like that and putting that time and personal investment into their clients. And one more thing I want to kind of get into before we start shifting over to rapid fire and wrapping things up is how do you kind of manage all that with, especially with personal boundaries and not taking on sort of speak the pain of your clients? Is it hard when you have these people that are texting you at 3 a.m. and those kind of things for you to kind of like not take it on yourself, or how has that been for you throughout your journey?
I've been able to manage it rather very well. It doesn't interrupt me from doing what I have to do. I'm very focused, very goal oriented. I view it as being a part of what I do. So I try to incorporate it into my life as much as possible. A lot of people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning for worse things. If I'm getting up, if I have one sleep in 2 weeks that's disturbed because I got up to help out a client, that doesn't impact me in any negative way whatsoever. And the value that I give to my client, speaks value. So for me, it's worth it.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. And then, sorry, I lied. I said one last thing before we get to the rapid fire, but there is one more thing I want to talk to you about, because I do think it's something that's unique among lawyers that I've seen, at least. And this is the way that you communicate information and you have your value out there through your blog. So can you speak a little bit more to that? Because I would love to see more lawyers take notes and get inspired by that.
Yeah, it really started like when you start your law firm as a solo practitioner, you don't have a big marketing budget. You don't have all kinds of money to spend on ads and all of this stuff. So you really have to get creative. So you have to find other ways to do that, right? So for me, it started from, writing articles, writing my book, leveraging that to establish myself as an authority figure, right? And leveraging that to get speaking engagements, right? And then the power of social media, these platforms give you access to, hundreds of millions of people. And they help you target specific audiences very well, right? Because it gives you so much data, right? So you can so for me, it was really a no-brainer. I started out doing blogs, and then from that, I didn't see any lawyers, particularly in Canada, doing video logs. Some lawyers do it in the United States of America. And I said to myself, this is a much more, a better way to connect with an audience when they actually see you, hear you, they see your body language, they hear your voice. The visual medium, TV medium is so much more powerful. So I jumped on that. And then, just like where I had to wear multiple hats when I started my business, creating a vlog, I realized I knew nothing about video editing. I knew nothing about lighting. I knew nothing about, getting proper voice quality. I now have a DJI mic that I use. I mic myself up. I knew nothing about the green screen and then removing, putting the white background. I knew nothing about the gym. So I had to go back to square one and learn all of these things from scratch. So my first video took me probably a week to 2 weeks. Now I do it much quicker.
I imagine. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where, the first one's always toughest. But then the more of it you do, the more efficient you get, the more smoother it becomes, the better you get, the less time it takes. And then of course, the thing about video is how you can repurpose it. Once I video, a longer video, you can repurpose it. You can take segments of it. You can put it in a shorter video. If you're putting it on something like, TikTok, where, the attention span of your audience is much less. It has to be more maintained. You can take the audio. You can repurpose that, right? You can take still shots of the video and repurpose that, right? So doing videos just gives you such an edge. And then transitioning from doing videos for LinkedIn, where for more sophisticated audience who doesn't mind watching my entire 50-minute vlog, versus doing videos for TikTok, which took me the longest time to finally start creating content for, because like many years, I looked at that and said, this is not for professionals. I'm not going to get out there and dance and, music.
Yeah, I think we all said that originally. You're just going to get onto it, right? So
you do it, and then you just figure it out. You figure out, no, this is a powerful medium. You have to get where your prospective clients congregate. And many of them congregate on TikTok and want nothing to do with LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. So you have to, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think you're definitely right. Even be able to have that message reach a wider audience, that's obviously one benefit, but then be able to, like you said, attract that target audience that then sees your personality, they see what you're like, and they'll be more drawn to work with you because they can imagine what that relationship will look like, right? Definitely a huge opportunity for any lawyers out there who aren't already on those platforms or using video in general. So
your personal brand is so much more powerful. What more people know about Gary Vee than they know about theta media, right? So personal brand is something you really have to invest the time in.
Yeah, definitely. But I think you're a great example of that for sure. Awesome. Well, I think this has been great. So let's just end with a couple of quick fire questions here for you. So the first I have is, what is your favorite book, aside from your own book, of course? What's something that you've read recently that's inspired you or shifted your perspective in some way?
I mean, I'm reading a couple books now, actually. I actually have the leading Robert Cialdini's Influence of Psychology and Persuasion. I actually saw him speak in Nashville, Tennessee last year. My law firm won an award for best new law firm there. And he was one of the speakers. And as soon as I heard him speak, I had to buy his book. I'm fascinated with the psychology of persuasion. I think it's so important from, marketing to, a lawyer trying to persuade a jury inside a courtroom to, even in your day-to-day life as well, right? And learning psychology about how to influence people and also understanding how people influence you is so important. Another one of my favorite books that I like was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. That's a book I read, I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago. Love to learn about his struggle from poverty to where he is now, to being one of the most world-renowned long-distance endurance runners, and just how he uses his language, calluses the mind and strengthens the mind to do incredible things that you think are impossible. Things like his 40% rule. So those are two books that I really like. I also like Anti-Fragile. Got to mention that one as well. That's from Nassim Nicholas Taleb. he's the author of the Black Swan. That concept of anti-fragileness, and it's fascinating. It's finding a concept that's opposite of being fragile, and learning how certain companies, especially in the global pandemic, didn't just survive; they thrived when everything around them was going crazy. And just understanding how that's possible, something he delves into, I find just fascinating.
That's amazing. I'll have to pick up all three of them. They all sound great, especially that the psychology of persuasion. That sounds I think that could definitely help anybody in their career, right? But the other two as well. So that's great. And then the last question I have for you is, if you could work in any other career field right now, although I don't know that you'd want to, because you're obviously so excellent at what you do, and you've obviously been building this career since you were a child, but in a hypothetical world, if you could work in another career, what would it be?
This may surprise some people, but prior to law school, I was also involved in acting. I've done like a Raptors commercial television series. And before I started, like around the time I was in law school, I actually wrote a 3-part series, a book called Voices in the Darkness. And so for me, like the job that, I kind of, envisioned possibly doing if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now is being like an executive producer to a television series that adapts my novels that I wrote.
You will see that. I think that'd be, and also I feel like that whole acting experience probably helps you with your content. Like speaking of that as well, because you learn how to just communicate more effectively and attract an audience and that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. It helps us in the courtroom as well. It really helps when I'm creating content for my vlogs. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's, well, I guess, go ahead. Speaking of the blog, go ahead and tell us where people can find the blog, where they can find all your other content, and how they can get in touch with you if they need to hire a personal injury lawyer.
So my blog is called Personal Injury Lawyer Tips. You can go to my website, which is rudderlawgroup.ca. And you can click on the vlog tab, and then you'll see all the vlogs that I post. They're categorized under catastrophic impairment law, tort law, personal injury law, and accident benefits. I also have a YouTube channel as well, where I post on my blogs as well. So the handle is just Rudder Law Group. So you go to YouTube, type Rudder Law Group, you'll find all of my posts. Again, I try to organize them based on the specific content I'm talking about to kind of make it easy for people to access.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I'm sure that's a great resource as well for anybody who just if you're starting this process or you just want to learn more about personal injury law. I think that's a great resource for people to have. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm sure people will get a ton of value out of this. So again, thank you for taking the time to come and chat with us today. And we'll look forward to seeing what you get up to the next few years here with your business.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. I hope it gave some value to you and your audience. And hopefully I can maybe come back sometime in the future.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Legal Connect podcast. We hope you found our conversation informative and helpful in navigating the process of hiring and working with a lawyer. Make the process of hiring a lawyer easier than ever and ensure the best match possible through our platform at lawchick.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.